Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we have another Kickstarter preview. This one is for Subatomic. It's from Genius Games, the people who brought you Cytosis. And it is a deck builder, an introductory to deck building, as well as particle physics.
Yeah, so this is a chemistry-based game. It's very cool. Anytime that you introduce science with gaming, is really unique because it can be taught to high school kids, middle school kids, and so forth.
Yeah, it's one of those things I've always thought. I've actually substitute taught in the past, and I've actually brought some board games, not even science-based board games, but just some rudimentary board games that a lot of kids might not be familiar with, and it's amazing how much it will engage them.
Yeah.
Do something like this or Cytosis, and you're really going to get kids to learn when they don't know that they're learning, which is really the trick to doing that.
I mean, I got to tell you, I'm 43 years old, and I've never heard of an up cork and a down cork, but now I know what they do, right?
Exactly.
So this is very much a prototype that you see in front of you. There's a lot of paper elements here. However, the final product will look fantastic, like they always do. So you're building subatomic particles. You're trying to build elements. The elements in the game are your victory points. You have a number of elements on the board. There's 4 different types of elements. You have helium, lithium, beryllium, and boron. And they all give you a different amount of atomic mass, which are the victory points. But you're also trying to collect sets of them because you get multipliers in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And these elements are a little more difficult. Some of them are more difficult than others to build, so you're going to have to put a little bit more investment into them, but you're going to get more points. And then, like Jeremy said, when you achieve one and take one, you're going to be putting some tokens out here on the board that kind of count as an area majority at the end of the game to score a few more points. Yeah,
each time you collect one of these element cards, you're going to put 2 of your scoring markers on any of these locations, and you can't place them into the element that you just collected. And the in-game trigger is actually when all of your scoring markers are done, you're going to tally up the victory points. So how does the game actually work? In the center of the board, as we said, is you have your main board. You have all of your elements off to the side, or all of your end goals off to the side. You have your elements here. You have an annihilation track across the top. The annihilation track is the way to call cards out of your deck, just like any good deck builder, but it's not done with cards in this instance. It's really cool. You can do it at any time, but it costs you energy in order to get rid of those cards.
Yeah, energy is another one of the currencies in this game. You'll see these tokens down here. At any time, and this is kind of unique for some deck builders, at least the ones I've played, you can play cards out of your hand face down, not using their face value, but just face down to collect some energy, because energy is a currency that's going to power a lot of the rest of the things that you do in the game.
Across the bottom of the board, you have single subatomics, and you have larger subatomic cards. All of your single ones are basically electrons, protons, or neutrons. And then across the bottom, you have a variety of these. Either these will give you one or the other, or possibly both if it's a larger or better card.
Yeah, they're more powerful cards that offer flexibility, like you could use it as a proton or a neutron, and there's even some that you can use as a proton and a neutron.
Yep. Across the top, you have 4 different scientists. These cards are stacked. There's a range of different scientists, and you can use any 4, but they get more expensive the further down the deck you go. So the first people to get there, they cost less money or less energy in order to grab them.
Right, and these cards, unlike the rest of the cards in the game, they do have the same back, so you're going to put those right into your hand, but when you play them, these are those deck building cards that allow you to do things like draw 3 more cards, break some of the typical rules that you'd find throughout the rest of the game.
Yep. And then you have a player board. On this player board is all the different actions that you can take on your turn. You have a place for your protons, your neutrons, and then your electrons. And then you have your atom here. And this is where you're going to be marking how many protons and neutrons and electrons you have in order to be able to build these elements. It's a really cool game because the fact that you're using your cards to buy other cards, but you're using your player board in order to build the elements, which is very unique.
Yeah, so no matter what element you're going after, you're going to be putting these tokens on your board, increasing their value, all towards building one of the elements. For example, I have lithium here. This is going to take 3 protons, 4 neutrons, and 2 electrons. It's going to give me 7 points. Whereas, for instance, boron's going to give me more points, but I'm going to have to spend more time putting more neutrons and protons into the equation, if you will.
So how does the game work? At the start of the game, every player is dealt a number of cards. In that deck of cards, you have 4 up quarks, 4 down quarks, and 3 particle duality cards. All of these cards are used to build protons and neutrons, which is very unique. So on your turn, you're allowed to do anything that you wish to do with the 5 cards that you've drawn up into your hand. You can, as David said, you can place any of them or all 5 of them face down and just grab 5 energy. And you can kind of do these in a mix. You can do the energy first, or you can play the cards to get things first. So what are you trying to do? On your player board, it tells you exactly how to build a proton, how to build a neutron, and how to build an electron. At any given time, you can get rid of 2 up quarks and 1 down quark to get a proton, or you can get rid of 2 down quarks and 1 up quark to get a neutron, or 2 of the dualities to get an electron. All this is very scientific too.
Right, it's all legit, and that's going to happen right on your player board. So when you discard those cards, you're going to move your tokens right on your player board. The alternative is to grab some cards from the display. In much the same way, you're going to look at the cards on the board, and for instance, a proton here is going to cost me 2 protons and 1 neutron, just like it did on the player board. But in this case, you're not going to move anything on the player board. You're just going to add this card to your discard pile so you can use it in future rounds. That way, you have 1 card now that just gives you a proton. You're not having to build it on the fly. Note too, this, above all of these cards, you're going to have to spend energy to do that. So like Jeremy said, you might want to discard a couple cards face down, grab a couple energy, then buy a card. You're going to set yourself up for future rounds that way.
Yep, so all of the cards on the bottom of them have a cost that tells you exactly what you have to use. Some of these require up quarks and down quarks. Some of them require actual protons and neutrons. There's kind of a progression system within the game in which you have to do something in order to get something a little bit better through the course of the game. Now, as I said, as David said, you were marking your board. What does marking your board mean? When you gain protons and neutrons, you're going to notice here you have electrons that spin around your nucleus, or your protons and your neutrons. Each of these have numerical values numbered 1 through 5 on the protons and 1 through 6 on the neutrons. You're going to have these little glass beads that every time you create one, you put it there or you slide it up to a higher progression. And that's simply to mark how many you need in order to create the elements. Again, you're not using cards to buy the element cards. You're using your player board in order to claim these element cards. When you claim these element cards, they can be done anytime on your turn as long as you have the right numbers in order to do so. However, you lose everything from this, so you're going to reset back to 0 on all 3 of those tracks.
Yeah, the game becomes about building an element, and hopefully in the process of doing so, having built a deck a little bit better so that it becomes a little easier to build your next, and so on and so on.
What's really cool is, though, when you claim the element, you're simply going to take that card and you're going to put it face down in front of you. Of course, everyone will know how many points that generated for you at that time, but people will probably forget through the course of the game. Then you're allowed to take your scoring markers. So, for instance, I scored this helium. I can take 2 of my scoring markers and put them anywhere on this board, except helium, because that's what I just got. I could put 2 of them in the same location, or I could split them up into 2 different locations. If there's any of these bonus tiles on there, I'm allowed to take 1 of them if I claimed an element, and 1 only, if there's 1 available. I simply decide to take that, and I can use it right then, or I can use it through the course of the game. But once it's gone, it's gone. So it's kind of a race in order to grab these. But also, you're marking the locations on here to get multipliers for how many particular cards you have. So you want to score a variety of them in order to get multipliers for them.
Yeah, so for example, Jeremy placed in beryllium here. If at the end of the game he has area majority in this with his player tokens, he's going to get 3 points for every beryllium that he has. Now, thus far he only has the helium, but now that he's placed in beryllium, he's going to be eyeing the beryllium element cards that come out throughout the rest of the game.
Yep, and you're going to keep doing that until all the scoring markers are done.
Right. And that's really all there is to the game. This game is, in its purest sense, a clean deck building game where, just like the original deck builders out there, you're trying to hone your deck. You want to cull it to make it as lean and mean as possible, but you need to be careful about culling it too, because there are certain cards that you definitely don't want to get rid of too soon, because it's going to prevent you from getting some of the newer cards.
Let's talk real briefly too about the extra actions that you can take, because I think this is important too. On your turn, you're allowed to play your cards to do any of the things that we mentioned. Building your atom, buying new deck building cards, claiming element cards. But you also have 3 other options that you can take. You can spend 1 energy to wipe any row. So if there's a combination of cards that you know you're not going to get because they're not in your deck, you can wipe those to try to get something else. You can spend 2 energy to draw cards. So in most deck building games, you have cards that let you draw additional cards. And here, if you have a collection of energy and you've been collecting energy, you can spend 2, draw a card. Spend 2 more energy, draw a card. So it's a really cool engine. And the coolest part I like is that, again, as I said, there's no way to call your deck inherently with cards. It's all done with this annihilation track. And this annihilation track is going to start a specific number according to the number of players. But to annihilate, you spend whatever energy it says on that track. In this case, 2 energy. I get rid of 2 energy and I get rid of any 2 cards from my deck. That's calling it. But this is going to move up, making it progressively harder for everybody at the table to get rid of. So by the end of the game, it's going to be costing 4 energy to get rid of cards, but you're going to need to, because some of the cards, once you've started to build your deck, your protons and your neutrons are far more valuable than your up quarks and your down quarks.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a sweet spot point at which you're going to want to annihilate.
Yep.
So the way this track works is it's going to benefit the person who takes the chance early on and say, you know what, I probably shouldn't call quite yet, but I'm going to go ahead and do that while it's cheap. But by the end of the game, it might be up there where someone has to spend 4 energy. Now, the good news is energy is not terribly hard to come by.
Yeah.
But again, you want to be as efficient as you can, just like any other deck builder.
Absolutely. So guys, that is Subatomic from Genius Games. If you guys have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. We'll answer them for you. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 2 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored in part by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.